All right, in this video, we are going to talk about analyzing a rhetorical situation. So reading a rigorous text in order to figure out how to identify and describe those different components of the rhetorical situation, including the speaker, the purpose, the audience, the context, and the exigence. So we're going to use our acronym over to the right here to help us remember those different pieces. Again, it's speaker, purpose, audience, context, and exigence. And we are going to read a past prompt from the AP exam and just kind of mark it up as we go to show you how I go about picking out these different things and reading more critically so that I have a better awareness of that rhetorical situation. So the first thing that we're going to use is any kind of contextual information that's provided. So right here, this is actually the prompt from a question 2 rhetorical analysis, and this is always a rich source of a lot of the information or these components of the rhetorical situation. So what I'm going to be doing in this video is I'm kind of going to color code. I have a color for each letter of our rhetorical situation. So for example, my S for speaker is purple, and when I find something in the text that reveals something about the speaker, tells me something about them, I'm going to highlight with purple to match that kind of key I have over on the right. So this is kind of going to be a think aloud where I just kind of read through the passage, stop, mark it up, and kind of explain my choices to point out why it is that I would identify that as speaker, audience, purpose, or whatever component we're looking for. So let's get started. In the following letter, Abigail Adams, who was alive from 1744 to 1818, writes to her son, John Quincy Adams, who was traveling abroad with his father, John Adams, a United States diplomat, and later the country's second president. There's a lot of information in there alone, so I'm going to switch to purple here because we definitely learned about our speaker. It is Abigail Adams. Abigail Adams lived during that time period, and we also know she would be a first lady as her husband was the second president. We also learn about our audience, so let me switch to yellow here, because her audience is her son, John Quincy Adams. And then there's also some context already as well, because he is traveling abroad with his father, who would be a diplomat and eventually become the country's second president. So based on just this first sentence, I have a speaker. I know that she is a parent to her audience, which we can always kind of make some assumptions about a parent wanting the best for their child in an ideal situation. We know that they are a highly regarded family, as the dad is a United States diplomat and that he will later become the second president. All of these things kind of affect our rhetorical situation because we know that Abigail Adams is a respected woman. She probably wants the same for her family, and they have an important legacy that they're creating as the Adams family. So just in that sentence alone, I'm already getting a good sense of this rhetorical situation. The rest of this prompt is really just talking about if I was going to write the essay, but I'm not. So I'm just going to cross out that part. But I am going to give a little note, let me switch to my highlighter here, of this right here. Anytime we see one of these two statements, it's part of the purpose, right? So part of her purpose is to advise her son. We're going to have to read to kind of figure out what her advice is, but that's definitely something that we can include in our understanding of the rhetorical situation. So already, just from the prompt, we have quite a bit of information about speaker, audience, we have some context, and a little bit of a hint at the purpose of the letter as well. So this next section is the first couple paragraphs of the letter, and as you see, we'll kind of go through all of it. But in the very first line, again, we have a little bit of context because we have a very specific date. What this can provide is historical context. So I'm going to make myself a note because I know that in 1776, so just 4 years before the Declaration of Independence, my pen is not writing that well, was drafted, and so they are in the thick of the American Revolution. I'll put a little note of that below too. So if we're thinking about this added piece of context, clearly this is a very unique time in American history. Because Abigail Adams is the wife of a United States diplomat, obviously they are very involved in this American Revolution and of course would play a heavy hand in it. So that's something that I want to keep in the back of mind as I kind of read through this letter and figure out what that advice is that she was hoping to give her son. So let's read the first paragraph. I hope you've had no occasion, either from enemies or the dangers of the sea, to repent your second voyage to France. If I had thought your reluctance arose from proper deliberations, or that you were capable of judging what was most important for your own benefit, I should not have urged you to accompany your father and brother when you appeared so averse to the voyage. So here's a little piece of context. It can also be kind of dabbling in our exigence as well. Let me switch to my highlighter. Because there's a few things. She points out that Adams was reluctant, that he appeared so averse to the voyage. And because this is how she's starting her letter, that's a good sign that this might be why she's writing the letter. So I'll put in a little note for that because, as you know, blue is our exigence. So if John Quincy wasn't interested in going in this trip, this is maybe something she wants to address right at the beginning. Golly, my pen is not writing very well today. And that's why I've highlighted in blue, because that's kind of giving us a little bit of a hint, talking about why she needs to write him a letter, why she needs to give him advice at all. You could also kind of talk about this in terms of context, because this is a different trip, so he's already been to France. That's part of the context. But clearly we can also see that this reluctance and this appearing aversion is also kind of part of the context that happened right before this letter was sent. So that'd be an example of like immediate context, right? His reluctance to go clearly happened very shortly before this letter was written, and that reluctance is also why she's giving her son some advice. All right, next paragraph. You, however, readily submitted to my advice, and I hope will never have occasion yourself, nor give me reason to lament it. Your knowledge of the language must give you greater advantages now than you could possibly have reaped whilst ignorant of it, and as you increase in years, you will find your understanding opening and daily improving. So just because there's a lot of the use of the word you in this section, I can tell that she is kind of expressing her understanding of her audience. So a few things that we learn about him is that he does speak the language, and he is going to learn more as he is there. In terms of her rhetorical situation, she's acknowledging that John Quincy is already very knowledgeable. He's a very smart kid, but an opportunity like this to go back to France is only going to improve that for him. So she's really addressing that audience part of her rhetorical situation there. Next paragraph. Some author that I've met with compares a judicious traveler to a river that increases its stream the further it flows from its source, or to certain springs which, running through rich veins of minerals, improve their qualities as they pass along. It will be expected of you, my son, that as you are favored with superior advantages under the instructive eye of a tender parent, your improvements should bear some proportion to your advantages. Nothing is wanting with you but attention, diligence, and ready application. Nature has not been deficient. So a few things she's pointing out here that kind of allude to a purpose. She talks about how it will be expected of her son that he kind of takes advantage of the privilege or privileges he faces based on who his family is, right? So she says, you have a parent who's watching out for you. You should be growing and improving because you've been given so much in life. She says, again, nature has not been deficient. So we're kind of alluding to that advice she has for her son, which we said was part of that purpose, and that she's kind of encouraging him to take advantage of an opportunity that even though he maybe was reluctant of at first, she knows that he has been very fortunate in life, and the output he puts out into the world should match that. I would also say that she kind of compliments her audience here, saying that nature has not been deficient, meaning that he is attentive, he's diligent, and he's steady. That in addition to the privileges he has as the son of a diplomat and respected family, he also has a positive nature. So in that way, she's kind of acknowledging her audience again. All right, next paragraph. It's a long one. Stay with me. These are times in which a genius would wish to live. It is not in the still calm of life or the repose of a pacific station that great characters are formed. Would Cicero have shown so distinguished an orator if he had not been roused, kindled, and inflamed by the tyranny of Catiline, Verres, and Mark Antony? The habits of a vigorous mind are formed in contending with difficulties. All history will convince you of this, and that wisdom and penetration are the fruits of experience, not the lessons of retirement and leisure. Great necessity calls out great virtue. When a mind is raised and animated by scenes that engage the heart, then those qualities which would otherwise lie dormant wake into life and form the character of the hero and the statesman. War, tyranny, and desolation are the scourges of the Almighty and ought no doubt to be deprecated. Yet it is your lot, my son, to be an eyewitness of these calamities in your own native land, and at the same time to owe your existence among a people who have made a glorious defense of their invaded liberties, and who, aided by a generous and powerful ally with the blessings of heaven, will transmit this inheritance to ages yet unknown. So in this paragraph, for me, it is further developing her purpose and her context. So let's start with the purpose. I think she kind of summarizes the advice she has for her son really well in this sentence. She says, all history will convince you of this, and that wisdom and penetration are the gifts of experience, not the lessons of retirement and leisure. This kind of plays into that exigence, right? He was reluctant to go, he didn't want to go. And what she's saying in this line essentially is that sitting at home and doing nothing isn't going to make you a better person. Wisdom and knowledge, that comes from going out into the world and trying new things. So it kind of relates back to that other line where she was talking about he's had a lot of privileges and stuff, to point out that her purpose is really to kind of encourage him to make the most of this opportunity, gain the wisdom he can from this new experience, and kind of live up to the potential he has and the son that she wants him to be. For context, she makes kind of a subtle allusion. She talks about eyewitness of these calamities in your own native land, and at the same time owe your existence among a people who have made a glorious defense of their invaded liberties. In this, she's making kind of a subtle connection to the American Revolution. She's like, son, you know of anyone what it means to put yourself out there, to take on a new experience, because you're living in the middle of the American Revolution. You can see what is happening in your own country, and you can model that same thing in yourself so that you can one day, as she says to her audience, become a hero and a statesman. So again, this paragraph I think is a really good summary of what her message is, in that she wants her son to take advantage of this experience of going to France, to gain wisdom from it, and live up to his full potential. All right, a couple more paragraphs. Nor ought it to be one of the least of your incitements towards exerting every power and faculty of your mind that you have a parent who has taken so large and active a share in this contest, and discharged the trust reposed to him with so much satisfaction as to be honored with this important embassy, which at present calls him abroad. So I'm going to note the context here. She says, you have a parent who's taken such a large and active share in this contest. Again, not only has he seen the American revolutionaries in his own country, but his dad is a leader in that American Revolution. So this reveals a couple things about our speaker too. Not only does she love her husband, but she admires her husband. And she admires the vision of what America could be, right? So this kind of shows us that Abigail Adams is patriotic. Abigail Adams is a devoted wife, and that she respects the work her husband's doing. And in terms of how this fits into this letter, she's hoping that her son, John Quincy, will be just as dutiful as his father. Last paragraph. The strict and inviolable regard you have ever paid to truth gives me pleasing hope that you will not swerve from her dictates, but add justice, fortitude, and every manly virtue which can adorn a good citizen. Do honor to your country, and render your parents supremely happy, particularly your ever affectionate mother. So here again, she kind of switches to talk directly to John Quincy again, and essentially says, you've always been truthful, and now you have an opportunity to be just, to have courage, and to show all of these good qualities based on what you do in this moment in regards to his trip to France. She's essentially kind of flattering him at the end here, right? Saying, like, you have never let me down before. I know you will do the right thing, essentially. We also, in the very end, learn a little bit more. Oops, wrong color. I want my purple because I'm talking about Speaker, because she flat out says that she is his affectionate mother. So that, again, gives us her perspective as that mother figure in his life. So what I've essentially kind of walked you through here, let me get rid of that, is how I would take a passage and kind of read it with all of these different components of the rhetorical situation in mind. How do I make connections to see how this purpose is building over the course of the text? A good rule of thumb in analyzing a rhetorical situation like this is to read once for understanding of the passage, especially like this one that's a little bit more rigorous, but then to go in and kind of see where are these different aspects being introduced. So that is how I would do a rhetorical analysis, or an analysis of a rhetorical situation.